Continuing, excuse me, continuing chapter 6 of Listen Humanity. Chapter 6 is the ways to the path and its states and stages. And we got to page 163, top of 163. The personal factors which cause the worldly man to look upon the various approaches towards truth as widely divergent or even mutually antagonistic are gradually transcended on the path. Eventually, the ways converge and their interdependence is revealed to the aspirant. He sees that every way implements the others. Bhakti or devotion becomes the expression of truth through feeling. The way of knowledge becomes assimilation of that same truth through understanding. And the way of action is seen to be the result of the will being actuated by that very same truth. In the worldly stage, man is drawn more to one way than to others because of the particular limitations of his character and environment. On the path, they blend with each other as the aspirant gradually succeeds in emancipating himself from the specific restrictions of mind and heart. Even the dry, self-imposed asceticisms of yoga flower as the individual realizes divine love as he follows the inner path. It is possible, by following any of the ways just discussed, to lose the individual mind, the lower self, and yet retain complete consciousness. However, this is only true when the zenith is reached through the inner path. The easiest and safest way to lose one's finite ego is by surrendering completely to the perfect master or to the God-man, avatar, who is consciously one with truth. In them, the past, present, and future of the individual are drowned. And during his implicit obedience to the master, he is no longer bound by those actions, good and bad. Such complete surrenderance is in itself complete freedom. Of all the high roads which take the pilgrim directly to his divine destination, the quickest lies through the God-man, Christ, Messiah, or Avatar. In the God-man, God reveals himself in all his glory with his infinite power, unfathomable knowledge, inexpressible bliss, and eternal existence. The path through the God-man is available to all those who approach him in complete surrenderance and unwavering faith. To the one who has unfaltering love for the God-man, the way to abiding truth is clear and safe. Such a one must waste no time playing with things that do not matter. Loyalty to the unchangeable truth, guided by enduring love, is the simple way that leads to God and abiding peace. Although God is more easily accessible to ordinary man through the God-men, yet God also reveals himself through his impersonal aspect, which is beyond name, form, and time. Regardless of whether it is to be through his personal or his impersonal aspect, it is necessary that the aspirant seek him and surrender to him in love. When the aspirant contemplates only God without a second, there is no room for love for God or longing for God. The individual has the intellectual conviction that he is God. Yet, in order to experience that state in actuality, the aspirant goes through intense concentration or meditation on the thought, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am neither this nor that. I am God. In exceptional cases, the individual may experience through meditation what he has assumed himself to be. This mode of experiencing God is not only difficult, but dry. Progress is more realistic and enjoyable when there is an ample play of love and devotion to God. This postulates temporary and apparent separateness from God and longing to unite with him. Such provisional and apparent separateness from God is reflected in the Sufi concepts of the states of Hama as Ust, or everything is from God, and Hamadust, or everything is for the beloved God. In each of these concepts, the individual perceives that his separateness from God is only temporary and apparent, and he seeks to restore this lost unity with God through intense love, which consumes all duality. The only difference between these two is that whereas the individual who follows the concept of Hamadust rests content with the will of God as the beloved in the concept of Hamaazust, he longs for nothing but union with God. Since the individualized soul, which is in bondage, can be redeemed only through divine love, even perfect masters who attain complete unity with God and experience Him as the only reality, apparently step into the domain of duality and talk of love, worship, and service of God. Marian, could you unmute and continue reading, please?
It's a little wide for my screen. I don't know if it's possible or not.
Let's try this.
And then if you can move it over to my left, there's a large white space at my left. Can you shift it more in the middle?
Did that do it?
No, that made it smaller, but still cut off on the right. If you can shift it over to the left screen. Usually it works fine. I don't know what. Let me view my options. Okay. I hid all the video panel. I hid the people. Okay.
Okay.
I'll read. Divine love as sung by Hindu masters like Tukaram, as taught by Christian masters like Saint Francis, as preached by Zoroastrian masters like Azer Kaivan, and as immortalized by Sufi masters like Hafiz, harbors no thought of the self at all. It consumes all frailties which nourish the illusion of duality and ultimately unites the individual with God. The awakening of this divine love in the heart of the aspirant and the cleansing of his being is one of the functions of the God-man and perfect masters. The life of love of a perfect master is unperturbed by desires or duality. Once the mind of the aspirant gets a glimpse into this life of true values, it protests against the bondage of desires and the cage of the separative ego life. The perfect master acts from the truth with which he is one, and not from any limited ego consciousness. Hence, his help is more effective than all the unaided effort the aspirant himself can make. The perfect master does not give something which is not already within the aspirant in latent form. He unveils the real self of the aspirant and enables him to come into his own rightful divine heritage. Complete surrenderance to the God-man is not possible for one and all. When this is not possible, the other high roads which can eventually win the grace of God are: 1, loving obedience to and remembrance of the God-man to the best of one's ability. 2, love for God and intense longing to see him and be united with him. 3, being in constant company with the saints and lovers of God and rendering them wholehearted service. 4, avoiding lust, greed, anger, hatred, and the temptations of power, fame, and fault-finding. 5, leaving everyone and everything in complete external renunciation and in solitude, devoting oneself to fasting, prayer, and meditation. 6, carrying on all worldly duties with a pure heart and clean mind, and with equal acceptance of success or failure, while remaining detached in the midst of intense activity. And 7, selfless service of humanity without thought of gain or reward. In the end, all walks of life and all paths ultimately lead to the one goal, which is God. All rivers enter into the ocean, regardless of the diverse directions in which they flow, and in spite of the many meanderings they may take. The high roads are important because they take the pilgrim directly to his divine destination, avoiding prolonged wanderings in the wilderness of complicated byways in which the traveler is so often unnecessarily confused. The various states and stages through which the pilgrim passes on his journey to God realization may be broken down into 3 phases, which the Sufis call tariqat, marifat, and hakikat. In the first, divine knowledge is experienced on the planes of energy as inner intuition, inspiration, and conviction. It's a star reference. Note, not to be confused with ordinary intuition, inspiration, and conviction, as inner sight is not to be confused with ordinary sight. In Sufic terminology, this glimpse of divine knowledge is known as tajirbat a tariqat, and represents a transition from ordinary understanding to a condition of inner experiences of smell, sound, and sight. During this first stage of unfolding knowledge, there is a far deeper conviction about spiritual realities than is possible through the usual understanding of the worldly man. However, even this conviction is not unshakable. It bestows only a mild and wavering degree of divine knowledge. The pilgrim has now only started on his spiritual journey and must face many trials. While becoming established in the first stage, many aspirants are unable to cope with the ordeals they encounter as inner sight is opened. Whatever the pilgrim encounters here is for his good. And if he has a master's guidance, he need not fear that he will be lost. Although at the climax of the first phase, tariqat, which is the 4th plane, the one real danger of risking a fall does occur through possible misuse of the extraordinary powers associated with this plane. During this first phase, the aspirant is disengaging himself from enmeshment in the material realm of action and ascending to the realm of energy. This is accomplished through the gradual dissolving of the multitudinous desires which chain his consciousness to the material world. Although the individual is now constantly dependent upon the finer realms of energy, mind, and divine consciousness, even while immersed in the realm of matter, still he cannot live freely in these realms because of his continued enslavement to the gross world. Moreover, he cannot receive in any appreciable measure the renewal which divine consciousness would pour into him, due to the resistance offered by the entanglements of the dense material plane upon which he lives. Nevertheless, it is these divine radiations, merely felt though they may be, nevertheless, it is these divine radiations, merely felt though they be, which enable the matter-ridden mind to face suffering and make the effort to rise in the higher realms of energy and mind.
Thanks, Marianne. Mahu, could you unmute and continue reading?
Yes. At last, weary of enslavement to the gross world, the individual decides to free himself from the enticement of matter. In this moment of irrevocable decision, the individual cuts himself loose from the bondage of gross desires and ascends to the realm of energy. He will now reinforced. The individual prepares for a release of vital force far greater than was ever available to him during his bondage to the gross. The activities of the individual are now more powerful, for his actions are unhindered by the low voltage characterizing the energy of the gross realm. Often, the aspirant becomes absorbed in the new powers now available, and he realizes that he can perform miracles and other phenomena. The tendency to wish to perform miracles or to judge spiritual developments by performance of such spectacles may persist for some time. Even spiritually advanced persons find it difficult to outgrow this habit of playing with illusion. It should be clearly understood that attachment to miracles is only a continuation of the habit of playing with illusion. It is not miracles, but inner illumination which will one day bring true freedom. In the realm of energy, the increased capacity of the individual to receive the downpouring of divine radiation gives him a greater sense of spiritual power, a larger measure of knowledge, and a deeper sense of fulfillment, although these are as yet intermittent and fragmentary. The individual continues to carry on the physical plane activities of eating, drinking, and other automatic activities of physical life. But he is no longer the tormented slave of unfulfilled desires rooted in the physical functions, although a recruit sense of,
I think the word
yeah,
is
tell me.
recrudescence, right,
Uh-huh.
Maria?
Yeah, you're right.
Recrudescence. I don't know quite what it means, but
Yes.
we'll check
What does
later.
it mean for the readers too? What does it mean? I mean,
We don't
listeners.
know. Everybody will have to look it up on their own.
On Google.
You know,
I think it might be might mean crud.
I think it's like some like basic element, you know, very basic.
Maybe
Crude.
that's where the word crud comes from.
I think so. I think it's like crude, like
Recrudescence.
crude. Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to read that sentence again. I'm sorry because it got disconnected and yeah. But he is no longer the tormented slave of unfulfilled desires in the physical functions, although the recrudescence of desires in a milder form is still possible. He is now subject, though, to new forms of restlessness. In desperate search for enduring peace, he determines to ascend to the still higher mental sphere, upon which the realm of energy fundamentally depends for its sustenance. Having crossed to this realm, the pilgrim is now at the second phase of the journey, in which he begins to see the light of God. Unfolding divine knowledge now amounts to real illumination, and the aspirant is giving knowledge of the past, present, and future. He is now firmly established in the divine path, and there is no longer any risk of his falling or losing his true illumination. There are still many trials, but he faces them with conviction, confidence, and resolution. This second phase occurs at the point which is called Abuliyat, or God's acceptance of the pilgrim, in quote. Here, being endowed with illumination, he knows what trials lie ahead of him, but he also knows that he cannot fall from this fifth plane, and is aware that he can meet any situation adequately. At a certain time, the pilgrim passes to the point described by the Sufis as ma'rifat, and sees God as he is. This is spoken of as being the sixth plane of ascent of the individual in his conscious return to the One, capital One. It is in the mental sphere, as was the fifth plane. In the sixth plane, the freedom, joy, and illumination that the soul experiences are all greatly enhanced, as the mind is in direct contact with transcendental, as the mind is in direct contact with the transcendental divine consciousness. The bliss experienced in this higher realm surpasses all possible pleasures experienced in the realms of matter or energy. This is now absolutely no resistance to the direct infusion of the unceasing radiations of light, power, wisdom, and bliss that overflow from the Godhead. The individual's happiness is unutterable, his vision undimmed, his power unrestrained, his peace undisturbed, and his understanding suffers no slightest momentary impairment. He knows no lack of any kind. He continually sees God as he is.
Thanks, Mahu. I'll take a turn. All that the individual enjoys in the mental realm
Could you
is
roll it up,
still
please?
not self-sustained, but is continually supplied by the never-failing emanations from the transcendental Godhead. Although the mind is completely surcharged with the heavenly abundance, which descends upon it from God, nevertheless, it constantly recognizes its utter dependence upon the renewal which comes to it from above. The higher realm of mind is no less dependent upon the transcendent Godhead than are the lower realms of energy and matter. For the individual, though enjoying perpetually the free life of the spirit, still has not attained unity with the Godhead. He has not yet transcended duality, nor realized himself as the infinite one. In short, man on the gross plane makes indirect use of energy and mind through the gross sphere, and he can experience only such joy, power, and knowledge as the limitations of the gross permit. Man on the subtle plane uses energy directly, but uses mind indirectly. That is, through the subtle plane. Also, his joy, peace, and understanding are still severely curtailed by the fact that he cannot make direct contact with the mind itself. Man on the mental plane can use energy as well as mind directly. Thus, he enjoys immeasurable power, knowledge, and bliss. But inasmuch as these are gifts from the Godhead, he still has a sense of dependence. He experiences the attributes of divinity as reflected in the mental spheres, but they do not originate in him. Even when man is able to make direct use of the mind, he falls short of that ultimate experience of knowing himself as the infinite Godhead. Although the individual experiences uninterrupted self-fulfillment, owing to his absorption in the replenishing divinity, Still, he must transcend the mind completely if he chooses to realize himself as the unlimited and eternal truth, power, and bliss of God. At this stage, the traveler sees God as the sole reality, but he may remain absorbed in this sight of sights, or he may cross the final gulf and become one with God. In the final and third phase of the spiritual journey, called Hakikat, man becomes one with God as the infinite truth. This realization is self-sustained. Man's consciousness is now completely one with the illimitable truth of the conscious God. The individualized soul has completely transcended the mind and established unity with the Godhead, thereby realizing itself to be the fountainhead of infinite love, infinite peace, infinite bliss, infinite power, and infinite knowledge. These attributes are now no longer received by the individualized soul as emanations from the transcendent Godhead, but are experienced as being the soul's own inalienable characteristics. Nor is this state excuse me, of superabundance merely one of self-sustained and unmarred spiritual self-sufficiency. It is a spontaneous overflowing in which divine consciousness sheds the glory of its superabundant life upon one and all. In this state, God knows himself as God. The goal has been reached. To recapitulate, the realization of God as the realization of God as he is has required the complete surrenderance of the false individuality of the separate I. All sense of separateness and duality is only illusion sustained by the sanskaras or impressions of the ego life and expressed through lust, hate, and greed. Through a pure life of selfless love and service, and by the grace of God or a perfect master, it is possible to brush away these limiting sanskaras. By transcending the illusory veil of separateness, the individualized soul comes to know itself as identical with God, who is the sole reality. God realization, which is achieved at the end of the last phase of the first journey and on the seventh plane of consciousness, in which the mental sphere is completely transcended, is the goal of all life. It is the reason why the entire universe came into existence. Marian, could you unmute and continue for us?
Yes. God realization is sometimes mistakenly considered to be the selfish aim of the limited individual, while in reality, there is no room for any selfishness or limited individuality in God realization. On the contrary, it is the final aim of the limited and narrow life of the separate ego. God realization not only results in the attainment by the individual of an inviolable unity with all life, but also in his dynamic expression of this final realization of truth through a spontaneous and undivided life of love, peace, and harmony. The life of the God realized is a pure blessing to all humanity. Within this state of God realization, God is known and experienced to be the only reality. And as there remains nothing further to know, one aspect of this divine consciousness is omniscience. Since God is experienced as being the only one without a second, having no rival to overcome and no limitations to transcend, the individualized soul realizes a second aspect of supreme consciousness to be omnipotence. Since God is also experienced as unconditional and spontaneous joy continually welling up within the soul, the third aspect of divine consciousness is realized to be unlimited bliss. These attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and unlimited bliss are not divisible parts within infinity, but differentiated qualities of one indivisible infinity. Being indivisible, no one of them is in any way curtailed by another. Since they interpenetrate each other completely, none can or does exist without the others. In God consciousness, to know is to exist as blissful power. To exist as power is to know oneself as unbounded bliss. And to experience bliss is to be permeated by divine knowledge in which knower, known, and knowledge are all one. Any existence in which power is limited, knowledge imperfect, or joy beclouded as a product of false imagination, and cannot satisfy the earnest seeker after God. Thus, in the truth consciousness of Hakikat, God knows himself as having infinite attributes, but he has no consciousness of the universe. In a few cases, consciousness of the universe returns to the God-realized soul without in any way obscuring the totality of his divine knowledge. This first affirmation of God consciousness in the universe may be said to constitute the first journey of complete divine knowledge known as Bhakayat. There's a footnote. This is the state of Jivan Mukta, a more complete integration into activities in the world of duality, is achieved by the perfect master in the state of Kutubiyat described below. Conscious now of the universe through the being of the Jivan Mukta, or Azade Mutlak, or Bakabila, God does not regard it as other than himself. Not only is his knowledge not handicapped by consciousness of the world, it, meaning God's knowledge, uses the shadow, creation, which it has itself created as a medium through which it finds expression. In this state of Bakayat, God not only knows himself as God, but also as everything. He now experiences his own infinite attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and unbounded bliss, also in and through the consciousness of the universe. God knows himself as being everything, and everything as being himself. His knowledge of himself includes the knowledge of everything in illusion. God enjoys the same infinite and unlimited attributes as in the first state of Hakikat, but their expression within the illusion of duality is naturally determined by the earthly vehicle in which the individualized soul functions. The God realized Jivan Mukta, though living in a world of duality, is aware only of the unimpaired unity which sustains and pervades the universe. Such a one experiences constantly the love which knows no limitation through time, circumstance, or mood. Though the Jivan Mukta lives and functions in the world of duality, his consciousness dwells beneath the appearance of things in the underlying reality of his self, meaning in God. In this manner, such a soul creates no cleavage between the illusory and the real world, nor does being in the world constitute for him any limitation on the spontaneous flow of divine love. On the contrary, the world, with all its dual aspects, becomes the medium through which his infinite love operates automatically. In this phase of realization, here's a footnote, that is, the Jivan Mukta state, the soul has returned to consciousness of the world of duality, but the focus of consciousness of the Jivan Mukta wanders between duality and God absorption. See God Speaks, pages 171 to 172. So in this phase of realization, as described, the individual enjoys the limitless attributes of God, but does not feel impelled to use them for the benefit of others. He has become fully conscious of his impersonal divinity, which automatically permeates and controls all aspects of the universe, and therefore he does not feel moved to intervene in the affairs of the world. Active interest in cosmic processes or activities of the illusory universe is possible only when the third journey from Bakayat to Kutubiyat, or Sadguru, meaning perfect master, state is completed. In this state, The fullness of divine knowledge, power, and bliss is not only experienced completely, but is also dynamically expressed. Here, the unlimited individuality of the perfect master participates fully in the life of the entire universe. In this state, God not only knows himself as God and lives as God, but works as God, coordinating the truth he has realized with the processes of the universe.
Thanks, Marianne. Mahu.
Thus, at the end of this third journey of divine consciousness, God takes active interest in the spiritual yearnings of other souls and extends his help in their onward ascent. In this state, as the perfect master, he is no longer detached from the happenings of the world. And the cosmic processes and events of the world are no longer left solely to the directions of impersonal divinity. God himself has become a person who is simultaneously fully divine and fully human. And he takes under his personal and conscious supervision the groping, struggling life streams within the universe. The Qutubiyat or Sadguru state or perfect masterhood is truly a state of personal godhood. His omniscient and unlimited love impelled the Qutub or Sadguru to use his unlimited power freely for the spiritual benefit of all who deserve his grace. He goes halfway to meet aspirant souls and he accentuates their progress, communicating to them his boundless, overflowing love to the extent that they are capable of receiving it. This is a state in which God offers himself to himself in measureless abundance in and through the universal duality. Throughout his expression of personal interest in the life of the universe, the Sadguru never becomes entangled in duality. He is never bound in any way to the world of form in which he is expressing his dynamic and unlimited personality. When his divine game in the world of form is over, he drops the link to his own bodies, means physical, subtle, and mental, and with the universe, without sense of loss or pain. He withdraws from the scene of his divinely expressed life in illusion and draws to a close his creative manifestation in the universe. Again, I like to read this again. Where is it? Yeah. He withdraws from the scene of his divinely expressed life in illusion and draws to a close his creative manifestation in the universe. Withdrawal from participation in the universe of duality does not in any way impair his consciousness of divine knowledge, nor his conscious constant and unbreakable experience of infinite power and bliss. He continues to remain conscious reality. Activity in the world constituted only action in an illusory universe. Withdrawal from it is only withdrawal from the unreal, through which he chose to manifest for the liberation of those still in bondage, and is termed the fourth and last journey. Chapter 7. Attitudes for aspirants and other groups. In previous chapters, general outlines have been given of the sufferings which finally impelled the individual to embark upon the journey. In addition, the major paths and high roads were described, by which a great majority of the seekers travel, and the states and stages through which the aspirant gradually progresses were briefly sketched. The entire spiritual process should never be regarded as one that can be described in intellectual terms, grasped by the mind and followed as a personal discipline. In many ways, it constitutes the abandoning of all the previous means by which the individual had thought to achieve lasting peace. In other ways, it is essentializing an enlightened use of those same methods, but with a new sense of their utility. The spiritual attitude represents nothing essentially new in the material life of the individual, but is rather a reorganization and reinterpretation of all that has existed in his life, and an infusion of new meaning into the present and future. In achieving this reorientation, the aspirant often finds himself temporarily confused. One of these points of confusion concerns his attitude towards intellectuality, science, and technology. If the spiritual guest is to be real, it cannot be deflected by an obsession with this vital nerve network of modern civilization. In some ways, the aspirant must place it in proper perspective with the totality of human development, and thereby by neither hypnotized nor repelled by it. Intellect is reserved, so to speak, by nature of man. To have intellect, one must be a human being, regardless of how keen and quick that intellect may be, though it will always remain just one of the stepping stones to wisdom, inspiration, illumination, knowledge, and at last, realization of truth. To keep playing on the stepping stone, however polished it may be, is like sitting tight on a heap of hoarded treasure, on a heap of hoarded treasure. Like everything else, intellect can be used as well as misused. The deeper the intelligence, the greater one's responsibility to discriminate between essential and non-essential service, and disservice, progress, and retrogression. The task of the aspirant is to use intellect as a tool, not to be overcome by it. Often one hears in religious discussion of the opposition between matter and spirit. There is no fundamental opposition between matter and spirit. Like the closely knit elements of life and form in a person, the spiritual and material aspects of human life are closely united. Realization of this would eliminate erroneous contrasting concepts such as God and man, one and many, light and darkness, etc., all of which spring from the illusion of duality. The fundamental link between spirit and matter can be seen in the necessary connection between ideas and deeds. Mere playing with the spiritual ideas without putting them into action is as unproductive as emphasizing the material at the expense of the spiritual. The simplicity of the real solution to all problems makes that solution increasingly baffling. The real solution lies in the elimination of all self-interest. This makes man practical in the truest sense of the word and gives him strength to face the facts concerning body and soul. The aspirant need not worry about the opposition between spirit and matter, but should rather concern himself with the proper use of the one as the vehicle of the other. Then he will realize the higher ideals which relate to the actions of everyday life. The living spirit behind love, service, and brotherhood then blossoms out in accomplished deeds and is no longer empty words and academic theories reserved for armchair practice. God's infinite beauty, power, and bliss are experienced with full consciousness in art, science, literature, nature, and all walks of life. Although the unconscious slavery of modern man to the industrial age is a serious matter, the emancipation of mankind from physical and economic slavery is a comparatively easy affair. The real slavery, because it is most cruel and destructive of all, is the intellectual bigotry which claims to possess an exclusive monopoly on all truth. It is people obsessed by such a belief who, when they happen to be in a position of material power, hasten the downfall of a laboriously built civilization or the disintegration of a living religion.
Thank you, Mahu. So we'll continue next week at the top of page 176.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Are you there, Eugene?